Blow, blow, blow till I hear the breath of the Spirit blowing in me.
Welcome to the Spirit of Life program. Lucia Pace is my name, and today we have back with us Rabbi Cowen. Rabbi Cowen was here last week sharing his story, his life story, as well as his understanding of the common values between world religions and, of course, Christianity. Welcome, Rabbi. Thank you for coming back to our program.
A pleasure.
Perhaps if you can recap for us how you've integrated your secular culturalism and your entry to religion as a rabbi.
Right. Well, as I mentioned last time, I was very concerned for myself, and I thought, and not only that, I felt there were many, many people like myself who wanted an integration of intellectual experience and religious experience. Because very, very simply put, I think that one of the greatest pities is the chasm between the academy and religious experience on the one hand. Religion is seen as something as the preserve of simple people, and arts and sciences is that of intellectuals. The truth of the matter is, of course, that every human being has a soul. Everybody has a spiritual need and a spiritual quest. Very often it's repressed in the intellectuals. And the intellectuals have a soul hunger. They would very much like to be able to integrate their own knowledge, their own experience with the realm of the soul and its knowledge. So this is my task. This has been my task. And very briefly, I did that in a number of areas. I think major domains. I did a lot of work in the area of the relationship between psychotherapy and spirituality. What kind of a psychotherapy is required to acknowledge the soul as an element of the human psyche, along with mind and body? So I did a lot of work on an important thinker called Viktor Frankl. We had colloquia, an international conference, and material, did translations and so on and so forth. In the area of the arts and of the natural sciences also, a very important series of forums in which there is a discussion of scientific method and cosmology and how it relates to a religious worldview. Once again, high-level interaction, also once again, very prominent thinkers. In the realm of the arts, that was something very special. I, in fact, engaged in some collaborative projects with some of Australia's greatest artists, in which they and I sat down together to produce religiously inspired work. I was not the artist, I was the teacher, but it was a kind of very interesting symbiosis which was accomplished there. And finally, of course, in the realm of philosophy, I did a lot of work there that melded my experience in Germany, Hegel, Adorno, and others, with theology, how we can say that these two worlds, the world of secular thought and religious thought, are really trying to say the same thing but differently oriented. And that's very important to understand the aspiration, the unconscious aspiration of the soul in a secular person. That's a teaser for the audience, because that needs to be explained at length and it can't be done now. And the book which you mentioned last time,
yes, the book is called
Politics and Universal Ethics, is the application of this also to the political and social realm. How it is, in fact, that's the religion, what the role of religion is in the realm of politics and society, and how religion interacts with politics, society, and economy, and so on. Now, but we spoke about, you mentioned the topic of shared values, and this takes me to a very new important point. And that is that whilst the viewers may remember from last time that I started off primarily being interested in the relation of my own faith, Judaism, with this, I became aware of a very important body of knowledge which is transmitted in Judaism, but which is a property of all humanity. These are called the Noahide laws. Now, Noah was the survivor of the flood. Mm-hmm. And we know that when the civilization was renewed with Noah, also a whole covenant was established. And this basically is centered on 7 fundamental laws, very broad laws, which take in the totality, essentially, with all of their detail, of human conduct. These were the laws by which Abraham lived 10 generations later. And these laws were again reiterated at Mount Sinai as part of the revelation. At Sinai, the Jewish people received a lot of their particular commandments, and they were never meant to be incumbent on other faiths. But there was a universal message which was there from before, in Abraham and Noah, that was also authoritatively reiterated through Moses at Sinai. Now, these universal laws, which are for all humanity, have become my primary focus in recent years. And they were endorsed by the United States Congress in 1991 as the bedrock of society since the dawn of civilization. They were endorsed by the previous Governor General of Australia, Major General Michael Jeffrey. In other words, this is not a Jewish concern. This is a universal concern. Yes. It so happens that a lot of the transmission of this detail came from Mount Sinai in Jewish tradition. But this was not just a Jewish thing. Jewish people had other commandments. This was for everybody.
Can I ask you, did you influence those, you said in 1991, the American Congress?
That was not me.
Did you influence
but I had a role in discussing these with the Governor General of Australia, who publicly endorsed them.
Right. Okay. Continue on. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So these laws are of utmost significance, and I will tell you that even I am now, as it happens, involved in a very important project which is actually being funded and encouraged by the Federal Attorney General of Australia to produce the shared values of the world faiths as a means of promoting harmony and unity amongst the faiths. Of course, the government sees it as a way of eliminating conflict, but that's true. It will certainly do that. But I think it's a tremendously energizing factor for faith in general, for all of our faiths, because I think we can all endorse this. And Christian and Muslim colleagues have indeed themselves endorsed these values. In other words, Jews have extras, Christians have extras, Muslims have extras. Indeed. But we have a common core. And the knowledge of this common core is extremely important. First of all, it unifies us. And it's very vital for society, because this is the fundamental palette of moral conduct in society and civilization.
On that note, we need to take a break, but I'd like to pick that up when we come back. Thanks. You've been watching The Spirit of Life. We'll see you back shortly. Welcome back. My guest today is Rabbi Shimon Cowen, who is sharing his understanding of the fundamental values that upholds all religions. Rabbi, you were talking about the Noahide laws that underpins all religions, the fundamental values, but how does this speak into politics? How does this get taken up by the politicians and instituted?
This is a critical question, because we know that these values are not simply something to study, but it's part of the divine will that they should become part of our society. We should live by them. Now, 2008 was a very important time for me, when I would say I became a little bit of an activist. I mean, I'm primarily an academic sort of a star, but I became an activist. I don't know how many of your viewers remember that 2008 was a very dramatic year in Victorian politics. In that year, there was a series of bills were passed. First, one of them was to produce what in fact turned out to be the most radical abortion bill in the Western world. Very radical indeed, abortion on demand, up to 24 weeks and up to birth to opinions, but the whole range of very unfortunate aspects. Then there was a relationships bill, which was strongly connected with homosexual marriage, seeking and so related to it in many ways. And there was then a concomitant bill which was interested in extending artificial reproduction technologies to single people, homosexual couples, and so on. and there was a euthanasia bill which was up, but that was defeated. The other three were passed. Now, these laws, in various ways, were all in contravention of the Noahide laws. The Noahide laws, very, very briefly, talk about the belief in God, the respect for God, basic sexual morality, which is, of course, the classic model of the heterosexual family and so on. They speak about the prohibitions of theft, murder, and the requirement of an orderly process of justice and humane treatment of animals and nature. But there's a wealth of detail in all of that. But we don't seem to be fully cognizant always that our society, in permitting abortion on demand, and also seeking to, well, as it was recently defeated, to set up homosexual marriage or other things which would approximate it, is in fact in defiance of two very fundamental Noahide laws, laws governing sexual morality and the laws prohibiting killing. Now, when you have such a challenge to two of the great 7 laws underpinning civilization, you must do something.
Indeed, yeah.
And so therefore I together with some others, one was Nicholas Tonti Filippini, whom some of your viewers may know, we formed an ad hoc interfaith committee. Ad hoc means it was set up for the purpose, not just for discussion, but it was set up to do things for the purpose.
Filippini is a
Catholic bioethicist. Yes, that's correct.
Yes. For those that don't know. Yeah.
That's correct. Now, so basically what we did, we then began to come together into action. We began to prepare submissions together to brief politicians, to meet with politicians, and to mobilize our faiths, Jewish, Christian, and also Islamic in due course. Because for politicians, not only ideas are important, but numbers are important, as you can imagine. That's the way politicians think. And so therefore we tried to make as good, as sound a representation on these views. And the wonderful thing was that we found ourselves saying the same thing. And these are in fact, well, the things we were saying were we were in fact articulating the shared Noahide laws. They may not know it as Noahide. I know from my tradition that these are called the laws which come down from Noah and Abraham and were from that universal aspect of the revelation at Sinai. They may know it in different terms, but we are speaking exactly the same language, and they're happy to recognize it and to call it the Noahide laws as well.
Very encouraging.
So then finally with my book, which was also a recap of all of this experience plus more. One thing I did was to organize, with the help of others, bipartisan launches in 3 state legislatures, or by politicians of 3 legislatures, Victoria, New South Wales and Tasmania. This was marvellous because we got politicians from both sides of the House, in each case, who shared these values, who showed that you can be a Liberal and a Labour or whatever it might be, but that there is a perimeter. There is a boundary which you can't cross. In other words, we understand that there is a diversity in politics, but there has to be a commitment there have to be boundaries. There has to be a commitment to a fundamental moral compass. And this has been a very important experience, a very rich experience, a very rewarding experience. Many politicians have come back very, very positively to this, because politicians themselves, whilst they are representatives, they also have conscience, and they are also looking for a moral template themselves. And I found that they've latched onto this concept of universal ethics, many of them, quite enthusiastically.
Rabbi, would you like to say something about the contents of your book?
Yes, very briefly. It starts with a chapter critiquing contemporary culture, which I call a form of hedonistic materialism, and why and how this is really diametrically opposed to the spiritual worldview. Then I go on to a section where I reproduce the various critiques which were presented to Parliament over those years. The 3rd and 4th chapters deal with theoretical questions. 1, how can we accommodate a diversity of political viewpoints within the perimeter of universal ethics? In other words, diversity is possible within the frame, within the matrix of universal ethics. And then also a question of, if we say that these ethics are divinely given and inspired, what is the space for human innovation? And finally, I talk about entry points for a culture of universal ethics. In other words, how could politics begin to think and incorporate universal ethics?
Yes, how can they?
Into its programs, discourse and discussion.
How can they? I'd love to hear a little bit about that when we come back from the break. We'll see you back shortly. Welcome back. You're watching the Spirit of Life program, and my guest today is Rabbi Shimon Cowen. Welcome back, Rabbi.
Good to be with
Yes, tell us, how do you integrate universal ethics into politics?
Well, this is the key question, because the action is the main thing.
Yes.
And doesn't mean it should be a thoughtless action, but we have to get there. Now, we've mentioned already that I did have occasion to meet with politicians, and this is very, very important, that my book was launched by politicians. And I think the political arena is the most efficacious place to go for change, very simply because they are the decision makers. The buck stops there. And if you want to have an effect, that's where you have to go. They are the most important arena in our society. Even though ideas are important, ideas well up and they influence politicians, but still that's the address. But the truth is, we have to get down to grassroots. Grassroots and tall poppies, to mix both extremes. What do I mean by that? We need to get we need to get something which I call spiritual literacy. Children in our society are taught maths, they're taught science, geography, all the different plain sciences, but they receive very little spiritual literacy. It's a very disturbing thing to see an adult or a student who's finished school with competence in various things, but spiritually illiterate, knowing very little about their own faith, having thought very little, having a very unsophisticated, a kindergarten level religion, and a matriculation or a university level secular studies. That's wrong. And you see it also in politicians, and you see it in academics. There is the whole spiritual dimension has been utterly neglected, and it's very bad, because we have a soul, we have a spiritual dimension. Not only do we have it, it's, in my view, it's the highest human faculty. So it deserves to be educated. Now, as I mentioned before, I have been asked by the Department of the Federal Attorney General to promulgate a manual of shared values of the world faiths. And on the basis of my work with Muslims and Christians, distinguished scholars, who have seen the Noahide laws as something which we can all endorse. I don't have to, reinvent the wheel. I don't have to discover the values. I don't have to cross-tabulate values from different religions. We have here a common legacy of humanity with which the world religions already resonate. So let us present this, at least. This would be an important core set of values which can be promulgated in education. That doesn't stop Christians and Muslims and Jews from, of course, teaching their own religions with their own additions and their own specific character and qualities. But we have a common core here. And this common core could well be a very important framework around which religious life will rally, around which students, and after people leave their student years, adults and leaders and thinkers will have a new spiritual richness. First of all, they'll have the values which come from the tradition, and they'll also have the consciousness. In other words, and this perhaps takes us to another step, which is not in the program of the Attorney General, but it's a further program which I would like to propose. It is that there will now be a time, hopefully we'll be entering a period, in which civilization, in which artists, in which psychotherapists and scientists and biologists and sociologists and politicians and writers will now be able to come into some kind of a discourse with the human spirit, and something which has been described as a terrible, as a sort of metaphysical repression in humanity. We have repressed the spiritual. It could flower. but it can flower integrally, so to speak, in the soil of civilization, in the arts, in the science, and so on and so forth. So my ultimate hope is not just to give the basic literacy, restore values to our society, and to answer the spiritual need, and to allow the soul to find its natural compass in these universal values, but also that we should now find that the intellect of society begins to engage itself with the human soul, the human spirit, and its tradition. And it will find that this is not something primitive. This is not something in conflict with all of the talents and the aspirations of the arts and science, but it's something which can be harmonized. We need to have the soul needs to be fused with our whole being, with all of our faculties. And I feel that this is something which civilization needs very badly. Religion is not something apart from civilization. It's the heart of civilization. And conversely, the soul is enriched by the secular faculties as well.
Mm. Well, you're living evidence of you've experienced both aspects of the knowledge side of the secularism, knowledge, arts, sciences, and now your soul calling out, beckoning out to you to show you that there's more. So you've been able in your own life to incorporate both, integrate both, and bring it into life and out into society, and now doing some amazing work with our politicians to rekindle the values of our society that are so hungering. We're really hungering for this, aren't we? There is something really amiss in our society. Would you?
I will put it let me just encapsulate in this experience. I was speaking with a very distinguished professor. When this professor began to speak about the spirit, he began to stutter. We need our professors, but we want our professors to be as literate in the human spirit and the soul as they are in their own.
Well, that encapsulates it beautifully, that illustration. Rabbi, just very quickly, we don't have very much time, but you also are the founder and director of the Judaism and Civilization. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Right. Well, this is an institute which was established in 1998, and has a website. And it has a whole series of publications, a journal, a monograph series, and forums, and so on and so forth. But I may soon be returning to the academic world, and my sincere hope is that I will return to it, and I will be able to bring with it the experience which I was able to develop outside the university, and that the university will be an expression for these ideas as well.
Wow, thank you. Rabbi, we've come to the end of our program. I just want to thank you with all my heart. I've really enjoyed immensely listening to your theories, your philosophies, and thank you for the great work that you're doing in our society.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to express some of these thoughts to your viewers.
Hope you'll be back again sometime. You've been watching the Spirit of Life program. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place.
Bring it to